Welcome back to the channel, everybody. I recently bought, fixed up, and then sold a 2005 Honda Element EX 4-wheel drive automatic. I sold it about 2 months ago, and I'm finally just clearing up my garage and going through all the parts. So I'm just gonna run through all the parts that I replaced on it, and then I'll show the step-by-step video like I typically do, and the long process that it took me to do everything. So give you a quick little tour of all the parts. I think these are all the parts that I replaced. There was definitely more than what's here, but it's been like 2 months, so this is the best I could come up with. Starting out, I did a transmission drain and fill twice with the filter. The AC condenser fan was out, so I replaced that. Engine air filter, cabin air filters, windshield wipers. I did the back one too, but I don't know where the blade is. I did both sets of axles twice. Those are the axle nuts. I did the front struts. The top hats were really squeaky. So in the car I had 250,000 miles, so I just put brand new struts on. Tailgate struts, rear adjustable upper control arms, front and rear sway bar bushings, front and rear sway bar links, tie rod ends, ball joints. Those were horrible. Did the spark plugs when I did the valve adjustment. That's the VTEC solenoid gasket that was cracked and leaking oil on the back of the engine. Those are drain plugs for the transmission and the differential fluid. I did the differential fluid, I just don't know where the bottle is. So yeah, let's get into it. First things first, I need washer fluid. When I was driving home from Virginia, it was a snowstorm, there was no washer fluid, and the windshield wipers were absolutely horrible, so that's next. Throw some new Rain-X wipers on from Walmart. And I also did the rear wiper blade. I always put these 360-degree mirrors on because when you have the seats folded up to the side and a bunch of stuff in the back, it's really hard to see out the side of the car. So I put these on the corners of the mirrors. Before I put the plates on, I'm just gonna fluid film inside the nuts here because eventually these will rust. Now I'm gonna be replacing the cabin air filters. All you need for this job is a flathead screwdriver. So just pop the glove box down, come in here, pop these little clips out. You just have to wiggle these out. The glove box will fall. Then you just push this tab and just pull out the filters. I'm always nervous I'm gonna find a dead mouse in here. Oh, what the heck. There was a mouse nest in here. I sucked out most of the nest with my shop vac. So now I just have to get this filter out. Here's a look inside. I gotta drop the blower motor so I can clean this out better because that's really gross. Plus, any little thing that gets stuck in that blower fan is gonna make a noise. So I better just drop the motor. This is gross. So in here is where the mice must have been eating this insulation and then taking it up to the inside of the filter. So I think I should put gloves on in case there's any diseases on that. This is where the mice were eating and peeing. I'm just gonna rip all this cloth off and throw it in the garbage. Now that this cover's off, I'm just going to unplug that connector, and then there's 3 screws just like that to drop the blower down. The blower came out, so I'm just going to vacuum up all these little leaves and then try to shove the vacuum up here and get as much as I can. The old filters are full of leaves, dead bugs, and mouse poop. Here are the new ones. All you have to do is pull these out and then put the new filter in this tray. Now I just put this filter in first. slide it over, and then this filter. And then this little flap just clips back in. And don't forget to reattach this plastic cover down here. Once you put these clips back in, you're all set to close up the glove box and move on to the next project. Next on my list, I'm gonna do the valve adjustment, and I'm also gonna look at the valve cover gasket if that needs to be replaced. So I'm gonna start by removing all these bolts. They're 10mm, and then I'll update you once I get them off. It looks like this one was broke. Somebody must have had the valve cover off at some point. I got all the bolts off. There's a leak here because this nut was not even remotely tight. So that's why the oil was leaking out. But everything else is out. I just have to pull this back and then lift off the valve cover. All right, I got the valve cover off. I took the spark plugs out. But you can tell this car's been kept up on its oil changes. It'd be all sludgy and gross looking in here, but it's nice clean oil. So without further ado, I'm just gonna get into the adjustment. I'm gonna link a video how to do a valve adjustment on your element up in the right hand corner. So take a look at that. But if anything major happens or anything super tight or super loose, I'll let you know. Here's an example of exhaust valves that are way too tight. You see I have the lobe pointing up in the right position. Barely any play here. That's not good at all. After I adjusted these, it's back to normal. So now all the intakes, I didn't have to adjust any of the intake valves. The exhaust 2, 3, and 4 were just a little bit tight. I only had to turn the screws like a half a turn to a quarter to a half a turn. Number 1, I had to turn the screws a full rotation to loosen. Now I'm just going to clean up around where the valve cover gasket sat, put that back on, put the spark plugs in, and put it all back together. I am putting new NGK spark plugs in, which is what the cars are supposed to have. I took out these Bosch and they're not in very good shape. Like, the tips are all loose, and it's definitely time for new spark plugs. So I'm gonna put the spark plugs in, put everything back together, and then start it up. I'm just gonna start it up and see if it works. This car was missing all 4 roof rack caps, so I got a set here from the junkyard. I also restored the headlight lenses, but I forgot to take an after shot. I'm also going to be replacing the struts. They are original with 240,000 miles, and while the springs are still in good shape, and I think the shocks are too, these top mounts are really worn out and it squeaks like crazy. So to save time, I'm going to end up putting, I already have them in the back of the car, brand new KYB struts, which is the best for like out of the box setup without changing the top hats or anything. So this is what I would hear every time I would hit a bump or go around a turn. So it's the top mount up there. I'm gonna heat up the outer tie rod end and the jam nut and try to break either one of those free. And that broke it free. So here you can see only the jam nut broke loose. The outer tie rod and the inner tie rod are still together. So now I have to loosen this. Now I'm just gonna spin this off. And I'm gonna try to leave the jam nut where it is. So I know that's how far to thread on the new outer tie rod. And take your 19mm socket. Here you can actually see how much play this tie rod had. If you're replacing this tie rod end, you can just hit it. If you're trying to save it, there's specialty tools that you can use. There's the old tie rod end. had a feeling that would happen. So I'm gonna grab these vice grips and squeeze this. That's way easier than trying to put the number 5 Allen key in here. Lots of free play coming from these sway bar links, so it's a good thing that I replaced them. Plus, you can see there's not much grease left in here. There's water getting inside, they're rusting, so I always replace these. I'm having trouble getting this ball joint out of the control arm. I've tried pickle fork, ball joint separator. I've heated it up with my MAP gas. I have an oxyacetylene torch now, but I don't want to do it with all this rubber here in case it catches on fire. So I'm going to take my angle grinder and grind the ball joint. I ground off the bottom of the ball joint there. And now I'll just take off these 2 bolts and the axle nut. And this right here is why you buy a rust-free element. You cannot do that with a rusty one. So now that I've got the axle pushed out, just by hand luckily, the ball joint's not connected anymore. The tie rod's off. I'm gonna take these 2 strut bolts off, they're 19mm, and then this whole assembly, even with the brake and everything, I'm just gonna rest on this box. I got a new ball joint kit, so I'm gonna try this setup to push that out. I don't know if it's gonna work, but we can try. First, I'm gonna heat this up with MAP gas, and if this doesn't work, I'll use the oxyacetylene torch. Yes. So happy. Here's a look at what happened. This pushed this rest of the ball joint through, but I had to get it really, really hot in order for that to happen. Just so this control arm expanded enough. And that saved me $100 for a new control arm. And I think I paid like $300 for this. So by the time I do this one and the other side and one more car, this torch will have paid for itself. Now I'm going to take off these 3 nuts, and that will drop the spring down. Here's the old, which I think is original. I don't know why this is painted, but it's got the Honda part number here. But the old struts and the new KYB. I'm going to install this one right now. So I got the struts in. And I just want to spray some fluid film up around the top before I tighten these bolts, just so inside here doesn't rust in the future. Now this appears to be the original ball joint because there's no snap ring, and you can see how much play it had. So I'm just going to push that out with the new ball joint press set. And yeah, it should slide right out. If not, I'll use the torch. These are the only ball joints you should use. These are like the original manufacturer, except now they have this snap ring made in Japan. That's what you want. 3.5. Now I just have to put the snap ring right in here. Just like that. Now I'm just gonna put the lower control back arm, get the knuckle back on, get the axle back in, and get it hooked up to the new strut. Now of course I've been fluid filming everything and greasing, anti-seizing all the bolts. And this for sure I'm greasing because I don't want that ball joint to get stuck in the control arm the next time it has to be changed in 250,000 miles. Quick little update, new shock is installed. I still have to do the tie rod end, the sway bar link, but the ball joint's tight, this nut is tight, and these are tight. And I just have to zip tie this, but I put that bolt on and this bolt here. Here's the old and the new front sway bar link, and this one was ripped and causing noise, so definitely gotta replace them. Here's the old and the new tie rod ends. The new one I got is like double the weight. You can tell it's much more substantial. The old one was all wore out, the boot was ripped, and there's a lot of free play. Alright, I'm officially done with this side. We have a new strut, new tie rod, new sway bar link, and new ball joint. There's really nothing else you can replace. I am gonna do the sway bar bushings probably tomorrow. Alrighty, I successfully did the driver and passenger side. This is what the driver side looks like. We got new strut, new tie rod end, new sway bar link, and brand new ball joint. So now that both sides are complete, I'm gonna go underneath and change the sway bar bushings. So this is the front sway bar, and I'm gonna be replacing these rubber bushings. This is a 14 millimeter. And now this just comes off. This probably wasn't worn out, but they're so cheap, might as well just replace it. Alright, the new sway bar bushings are installed. And pretty much everything up front that's replaceable I replaced except these control arms. But the bushings are still good, and they're still OEM Honda, so I don't want to change them for aftermarket for no reason. But yeah, all my creaks and rattles and clunks should be gone when I hit a bump now. And yes, still has the original catalytic converter. Here you can actually tell how clean this car is. This is the definition of basically a perfect element, rust-wise. Now moving on to the back suspension. I'm just taking a look. These brakes are almost new. Trailing arms, very, very good condition. They don't get better than that. Rear struts are good. The shocks aren't leaking. I'm gonna replace these upper control arms with adjustable, and that's so I can set the camber. You can see here, these tires they're pretty much new. Like I had them put on just before I bought the car. And so far, just a little bit of this edge is wearing. But if I were to wait longer, the whole side of the tire would start to wear out. And this would be down to the cords, and that'll still have really good tread on it. So I'm replacing these bars. I'm also going to do these sway bar bushings and these sway bar links. You can actually hear this clunking. So that's going to be the cause of my suspension noise in the back. And I'll be replacing both sides of the links and the bushings and the control arms. So the new control arms are adjustable, and I'm setting them just slightly longer than the old ones. The alignment machine will get it perfect. All right, I've got the new control arm on. I'm not gonna zip tie this until I get the alignment because it seems like a waste of a perfectly good zip tie and the new sway bar link. So I'm just gonna go to the other side and then I'll change the bushings. Next up, I'm gonna change these rear sway bar bushings. Here's the old and the new sway bar bushings. Now I'm going to change the rear differential fluid, so always loosen the top bolt first, which is the fill, then crack the bottom bolt open, drain the old fluid out, put a new crush washer in for that drain plug, then pump about 300 times to get the new fluid in, and close up the fill and you're good to go. Now I'm going to change the transmission fluid. This car had kind of a hard shift. It wasn't horrible, but I ended up doing it twice. So what you have to do is pull the dipstick out, crack the drain bolt loose. You don't even have to jack up the car. And then put the drain bolt back in, top off the fluid. It takes about 3.3 quarts. And then you want to drive it for about 50 miles and then change the fluid again. Alrighty, my phone's about to die, so I'm not going to film this, but I'm going to do another drain and fill on the transmission and put the new transmission filter in it. Next up, I decided to change the engine air filter. It wasn't that dirty, but it's only 20 bucks for a new one, so why not? Then I did the strong arm 4351 rear hatch struts. Raises the tailgate 3 more inches, and it really helps so I don't hit my head. Alright, I'm taking it for a drive after I did front struts and basically everything I just did in the video. It is so much better. There's no more squeaks when you're driving. It used to just constantly be squeaking. Anytime you'd hit a bump, it would sound horrible. Now it sounds like nothing at all. There's no sounds. The steering is much more sensitive, so I just have to get it aligned this weekend and all that suspension work should be done. I still have a vibration. If I get on the gas hard, you can't pick it up on camera, but there is a vibration, especially when I'm turning. So I'm just gonna go ahead and replace the axles. Also, if you watched my first video of this car, I noticed that the shifts were kind of hard. It was nothing to be concerned about, but I could definitely feel each shift. Just after doing the fluid, it's so much smoother. Okay, time to replace the CV axles, which is this thing right here. This is aftermarket, and it's probably a cheap one because it vibrates. I can tell it's aftermarket because that vibration dampener is not right here. But yeah, it's getting a vibration when I accelerate hard, so I'm just gonna replace these. So what I'll do is take this 36 millimeter off, take off the strut bolts, pull the knuckle forward, and then pull out the axle. I took the end of the CV axle out, but I have to go up underneath here and take some sockets with me so I can knock that inner joint out of the intermediate shaft. I don't know if I'll be able to show it, but I have to put a socket right here and hit it to knock that joint out. I'm also looking, and possibly the VTEC solenoid gasket, so I have one of those. I might as well just change it. It's hard to get a good angle on that, so I'm just going to take off this shield. And I'm going to take this socket and the hammer. I think it moved a little bit. It just needs one good hit, but I'm in a really bad angle here. I wasn't able to separate this while it was in the car, so unfortunately I had to take it out of the car. There we go. So I got these two separated. Now I'm gonna put this back in the car first before I put the new axle on. Here's the old and the new passenger CV axles. The old one, you can hear it had some play. The new one's nice and tight. So this should eliminate the vibration. And these are new axles from Napa, not remanufactured. This is the only aftermarket you can get that won't vibrate terribly. You can kind of see the boots are cracking, so these have been on the car a long time too. These are the driver's side axles. You can hear the play in the old one, and the new one has no play at all. All right, now I have both sides new axles in, and next I'm going to be replacing that condenser fan, but you have to get through some bolts on the bottom. So I'm going to take this plastic splash guard off. This is the bolt I'm taking out to get this beam out so I can get this fan out of here. That fan is not spinning, and that one is. So I'm going to be replacing this fan after I test it. Alright, I loosened the radiator support bracket here. I'm going to take out the coolant reservoir and the two bolts holding the fan, and I already unclipped the connector. Here's the old condenser fan. I tested it with power directly to the battery and it did not spin, and then I put the new one on the battery and it spun. So I'm going to install this and bundle the car back up together. Alrighty, I'm done with the AC fan. I'm not going to turn it on yet because I want the engine to still be cold. There's a lot of oil in this area, and I think it's the gasket, the VTEC solenoid gasket. It's leaking all over, so I have one. I might as well replace it while I'm here. Well, I think I found my oil leak. This thing is soaked, and the gasket is very, very hard. I tried to pull it off and it just broke in half. The other piece fell down, and the new gasket, it's flexible. So I'm just gonna clean this up, put the new gasket on, and put it back on. A tip when you're doing this: these are the bolts that hold the VTEC solenoid on, and they're really hard to get to. So please use a 6-point socket. Don't use a 12-point, because if you strip these, you're going to be very, very mad for a while until you get them out. And make sure your socket is on all the way. They're little 10 millimeters, and they don't take much. And I've seen it a lot of times. People strip these out, so you need to be careful.
This car is so stupid clean.
And it's all fucking my side windows on my passenger side. It's all.
Good enough. I have some bad news. I spent a long time putting those axles in today, and they're the new ones from Napa, but they shake. It's hard to tell on camera, but it's worse than the old ones I took out, and I'm honestly mad right now. Like, what am I supposed to do? Spend $450 for SC axles? Because the LX and EX axles are either sold out and like discontinued, or they're about $400 a piece. You can put SC axles in, but I've put these Napa new ones, and I've never had any issues, and it shakes worse than before. Like, what the heck? There, hopefully you could hear it. Now hopefully you can hear when I shift the gears too. You can actually hear the axles clicking. So I'm going to Honda right now to get some SC axles. Alright, since those axles shake so much, I went and I bought 2 brand new Element axles. I got the new Honda axles in, and let me tell you, oh my goodness, it is so smooth now. No vibrations whatsoever, even at full throttle and in a turn. The only thing to do is put Honda axles in your Element And I'm definitely gonna start stockpiling OEM axles. All right, tonight's agenda, I can tell this light right here and that light are out. So I'm just gonna replace the entire gauge cluster lights with LED. Here's the cluster out of the car. It takes like a minute to take out. I've got 3 packs of whites, yellow, ice blue, green, pink, blue, and red. In my car that I took across the country, I'm gonna do red, white, and blue. But this car, since I'm just selling it, I'm just gonna do all white. And it's very easy to change. You just turn these a quarter turn, pull them out, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All right, I got the new lights installed. It took a while of flipping. It took me a while. I had to keep flipping the lights around and the sockets so they would work, but everything works now. I've been driving this quite a few hundred miles now, about 472 miles since I took off this morning, and it's very nice. When I'm driving, the steering wheel doesn't shake. I started in Buffalo, I was down in Binghamton, now up to Albany, and I'm heading down to New York City right now. But yeah, it's a very, very nice drive. The dashboard lights look great. I'm very much enjoying this car. It'll make a great car for somebody, and it'll be like $6,000 or $7,000, but honestly, you can't find anything else for that price in this good a condition. As you can see here, no problems on the highway. I would take this car anywhere. And just like that, the car was sold. The total I had into it was $4,282. I sold the car for $5,500 and made just over $1,000. And let me tell you, all the work that I put into it, all those hours spent in the cold garage, it was definitely not worth it. But thank you for watching.